Imagine this. You're standing in your study, a quiet, timeless sanctuary filled with the smell of old books and lemon oil, the last golden light of afternoons spilling through lace curtains. You're fastening a pair of silver cufflinks your late wife gave you decades ago. A small ritual, a touch of memory before dinner with your son, the kind of dinner families share without thinking twice. And then, your phone buzzes. Three words appear on the screen: cold, capitalized, and urgent. Call me immediately. Your lawyer sent it, a man who never texts in capital letters. A man who's been your friend for 40 years who drafts every message like it's going into the Library of Congress. That's when you know something's wrong, terribly wrong. You answer the phone. His voice is tight, breathless. "Ed, are you alone?" he asks. "Can you speak freely?" You are. You slipped her in your chair, cufflinks still in your hand, your pulse thrumming like a war drum. "Yes," you say. "I was just getting ready to leave." What steps happened? Then he says it. The words that change everything. Your son Kevin filed a petition this morning. He sits asking the court for emergency conservatorship over you and your estate. For a moment, the world doesn't make sense. You hear the words, but your mind refuses to hold them. Conservatorship, a word reserved for the frail, the confused, the forgotten, not you. Not a man whose mind is still sharp as a blade. On what grounds, you whisper? David Sepp's papers rustle on the other end. You hear his voice, low and deliberate. The petition alleges cognitive decline, claims you scepter incapable of managing your affairs rationally, and that you become, he hesitates. He is susceptible to undue influence from external parties. Each phrase hits like a scalpel, precise, merciless. Your own son, painting you as an old fool. The dinner invitation suddenly changes shape in your mind. It's no longer an act of love, it's a trap. David exhales. "Ed, that dinner tonight isn't set a family gathering. It sets an evaluation. He said I'll have someone there. A doctor, maybe a psychologist. They said I'll be watching everything you say and do. They said I'll be taking notes." You end the call. The silence in your study is no longer peaceful. It's suffocating. Your home, once a haven of calm and order, now feels like a museum to a man your son is trying to bury alive. But instead of fear, what rises inside you is clarity, cold and perfect. The kind of clarity that comes before battle. You look at the photo of your wife on the desk, Clara smiling in the garden. She'd tell you to stay calm, to think, to fight smart. You decide you will not cancel dinner. You will go. But not as a father visiting his son. You'll go as a strategist walking into enemy territory. You fasten the cufflinks, they click into place like the chambering of a round. The man staring back from the mirror is no victim. His eyes are steady, steel gray, unflinching. The war for your life has begun. The drive to Kevin's house feels like traveling through a life that used to belong to someone else. The streets are familiar, but the world feels tilted, like the set of a play whose script has been rewritten while you weren't looking. The sky burns with the last light of day, streaked with orange and violet. Shadows crawl across the road like warning signs. You keep driving, steady hands on the wheel. Every memory, every small uneasy moment begins clicking into place like tumblers in a lock. Kevin Sepp's questions about your portfolio. Jessica Sepp's syrupy concern about your memory. Their soft smiles, their shared glances. You remember lunch at his club, all glass and brass and expensive laughter. He leaned forward, voice smooth as oil. "Dad, maybe it's not wise to manage everything on your own anymore. The markets are brutal these days. One wrong move." At the time, it sounded like care. Now you hear the truth beneath the words. It was reconnaissance. Jessica Sepp's call, the one that came a week later. "Edward, honey, Kevin said you been a bit forgetful lately. Are you taking your vitamins? It's so important for your memory." Every word, every false smile was a thread in the web. They weren't showing love, they were building a case. You think back to the real breaking point, the moment the mask slipped. 2 months ago, your study. Kevin bursting in, eyes gleaming with excitement. He spread glossy brochures across your antique desk. a high-risk real estate venture, luxury condos in a tech hub halfway across the country. He wanted a massive investment. You read the papers carefully, like you always do, and then you told him no, calmly, firmly. And his face changed. The warmth drained away. What replaced it wasn't disappointment, it was calculation. Then he said the words that froze your blood. That's my future money anyway, Dad. You stir just holding on to it for now. You remember the silence after that. You remember staring at him, realizing he didn't see you. He saw an obstacle, a vault that refused to open. You had chosen not to see it before. You told yourself it was youth, arrogance, the hunger of a man trying to prove himself. But now you understand, that was who he truly was. And tonight he plans to finish what he started. You think back to the week before, that quiet, fateful meeting with David in his office. You hadn't said the words aloud, but you'd felt the tension building. Kevin's probing, the strange conversations, the subtle disrespect. It had all begun to stack up like storm clouds on the horizon. You'd told David, calmly, that you wanted to review your affairs. A simple checkup, you said, but he heard the truth beneath your tone. David Chen had been your lawyer, your confidant, since you were a young man. He'd seen your son grow up, seen that ambition sharpen like glass. He listened in silence as you laid it all out. Kevin's questions about your finances, his talk about the house being too big for one person, Jessica's overdone sweetness, the sense that you were being quietly assessed. When you finished, David didn't laugh. He didn't tell you you were imagining things. He leaned back in his chair, fingertips pressed together, eyes narrowed with thought. Then he said, softly, "It's always wise to prepare for every eventuality, Ed. Let's make sure your legacy can't be touched, not by anyone." That's when he mentioned it. The legal fortress, the irrevocable trust. It would separate your assets from your name. The house, the portfolio, the savings, all transferred to the trust, owned by no one, answerable to no heir. You would manage it, but no one, not even you, could dismantle it once it was created. It was, as David called it, the ultimate defense of a legacy. Or, as he warned with a grim smile, a Götterdämmerung, a twilight of the gods. You hadn't been sure then. You thought you'd never need it. But tonight, as you drive through the deepening dusk, you know that moment wasn't caution. It was prophecy. David had the papers ready. The deeds, the portfolio transfers, the foundation charter, all sitting in a locked binder, waiting for one word from you. You glance at your reflection in the rearview mirror, a flash of silver hair, eyes hard with resolve. Your son thinks he's setting the stage for your downfall. He doesn't realize you've already prepared the battlefield. The streetlights stretch long across the windshield as you turn into Kevin's neighborhood, sterile perfection, every lawn manicured, every facade identical. His house looms at the end of the cul-de-sac, too large, too new, too eager to impress. The windows are glowing warmly, almost theatrically. You can picture it already. The dining table set for 3. Kevin waiting with that disarming smile. Jessica with her false kindness. And perhaps someone else. A guest, the observer, the trap. You park at the curb, kill the engine. For a long moment, you sit there feeling the weight of the cufflinks on your wrists, the last gift from the woman who believed in your strength. In the quiet, you almost hear her voice. Stay calm, be deliberate. Don't let them see fear. You step out of the car. The night air is sharp, cool, and alive with crickets. Your shoes crunch on the path as you walk toward the front door. Through the glass, you see movement, the silhouettes of your son and his wife. Laughter, the clink of glasses. It looks like family, but you know better. You press the doorbell. The chime echoes faintly inside. Footsteps approach. Kevin opens the door, face lit with practiced warmth. "Dad, you made it. Come in." His smile doesn't reach his eyes. And as you step across the threshold, you notice, on the sideboard by the entrance, a leather-bound folder. Thick, official-looking. The kind of folder lawyers carry. The air shifts. The game has begun. What Kevin doesn't know is that hours earlier, David filed one final document, transferring every major asset into the irrevocable trust. The ink is dry. The fortress is sealed. Whatever happens in this house tonight, Kevin has already lost the war he started. You smile faintly, just enough for him to see. He believes you Civ walked into his trap. But the truth? He sets the one who just stepped into yours. The door closes softly behind you. The lights glow brighter. Somewhere in the dining room, a fourth chair waits, a stranger's coat draped over it. The sound of your heartbeat fades beneath the hum of conversation, the clinking of silverware, the gentle murmur of betrayal dressed as hospitality. And as Kevin leads you to the table, unaware that his empire of deceit has already begun to crumble, you think of one thing: Clara's voice, echoing like a whisper from the past. Wisdom, she said, is a quiet weapon. You take your seat, you fold your napkin. You meet your son's eyes, steady, unflinching, cold. The first move is his. But the endgame? That belongs to you. And what happens next will decide the fate of everything: your family, your legacy, your very name. Because tonight isn't just dinner. It's war, served on fine china. And somewhere far away in a law office vault under lock and key, the sleeping giant of your legacy begins to stir. The clock ticks. The glasses clink. And you wait. For the moment when Kevin realizes the truth, that his father, the man he thought was fading, has just rewritten the rules of the game. The night is only beginning. And when it ends, one of you will no longer have a future. It started with a single phone call. A voice in the dark. A signal I had prayed would never come. David, proceed. Activate everything. Those words, calm, deliberate, irreversible, were the spark that would burn away the last bridge between father and son. Because when I hung up that phone, I knew the war had already begun. For years, I had told myself that my fears were only shadows, phantoms born of age and sleepless nights. But when David called tonight, his voice steady but urgent, I understood. The threat I had once imagined was real. It had a name, and that name was Kevin. My own son. The petition for conservatorship was not a plea for help. It was an attack, a declaration of war disguised as concern. He wanted control. Control of everything I'd built, everything I'd preserved, everything I'd loved. And so I gave the order, not in anger, not in panic, but in absolute clarity. The contingency plan, years in the making, was now alive. I drove through the quiet streets of the city, my thoughts sharper than they had been in months. Kevin's house was just 2 blocks ahead, but I didn't turn. I needed a moment. I needed the world to stop spinning so I could plant my feet firmly on the earth before stepping into the pit he had dug for me. I pulled over beneath the amber glow of a streetlight. The air outside was still. The houses here were smaller, humbler, homes built for living, not for showing. I could almost smell the faint scent of wood smoke and evening rain. For a moment, I let myself breathe. When I looked down at the phone in my hand, the bright screen cut through the darkness like a blade. I hovered over David's name one last time, not out of hesitation, but acknowledgement. This was the end of one life, and the beginning of another. He answered on the first ring. Ed, it sets time, David, I said quietly. Proceed. Activate everything. A breath on the other end. The sound of professionalism colliding with finality. Understood. Once I hit send, Edward, it sets final. Irrevocable. I understand, I told him. Thank you for everything. The line went dead. And just like that, a lifetime of work, a family's fortune, a legacy built brick by brick, shifted into motion through invisible digital wires. By the time the night ended, my name would be severed from my son's future forever. But I wasn't done. There was one more call to make. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name Mark. Not just a broker, a friend. One of the last who understood what my library truly meant, not in dollars, but in soul. When he answered, his voice carried the warmth of old pages and quiet rooms. Edward, he sighed. I was hoping I wouldn't sit here from you tonight. The time has come, I said. The arrangement for the collection, we stir moving forward. He was silent for a moment, then spoke with the weight of someone who understood loss. I still sorry, my friend, but know this, the University STIP's Special Collections team is ready. The Clara Coleman Reading Room will be a fitting tribute. The Clara Coleman Reading Room. My late wife's name, immortalized in the only way that mattered, through knowledge, through story. Thank you, Mark, I said softly. That's all I needed to hear. When I ended the call, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't sit grief. It wasn't sit anger. It was freedom. Decades of burden, expectation, disappointment, the exhausting ache of fatherhood, all of it lifted. I was no longer the custodian of someone else's future. I was simply Edward Coleman, a man with a stipend, a name, and peace. The war was still coming, but the outcome was already written. I put the car in drive and turned back toward Kevin's street. The fortress awaited. His home loomed like a monument to ego, glass, steel, and silence. No warmth, no laughter. Just money, polished into cold perfection. When the heavy door swung open, I saw them, Kevin and Jessica, framed by the glow of their too perfect life. Their smiles were bright, camera-ready, and utterly hollow. Dad, Kevin Sepp's voice was forced cheer. You Scepter here? We were getting worried. He hugged me, quick, mechanical. Jessica followed, her perfume thick, her eyes sharp and assessing. I was not family tonight. I was evidence. Edward, she purred. It's so wonderful to see you. Wonderful, yes. Like a wolf finds dinner wonderful. Inside, the house was a museum of sterility, perfect furniture, perfect light, not a single photograph, no sign that real life had ever happened here. And then I saw her, sitting in a rigid armchair near the dining area, a woman I didn't recognize, older, composed, watching. Kevin gestured toward her. Dad, this is Dr. Annabelle Sterling. Doctor. The word was deliberate, heavy. Her handshake was firm, her gaze dissecting. I knew the type, clinical, detached, polite to the point of cruelty. I wasn't meeting a guest, I was meeting the key witness for my own execution. Dr. Sterling, I said warmly. Any friend of Kevin Sepp's is a friend of mine. She smiled, small and professional. The pleasure is mine, Mr. Coleman. I have heard so much about you. I was sure she had, probably from the carefully edited stories Kevin had fed her, the ones about lost keys and forgotten names. The ambush was no longer theoretical. I was standing in its center. Dinner began. The table stretched like a boardroom battlefield, long, gleaming, cold. The chandelier above cast harsh light on polished wood and polite smiles. The stories started almost immediately. Dad, remember that summer at the lake? Kevin laughed. You left the car keys in the refrigerator. We looked for hours. Jessica added softly, oh, and last Christmas, Boston. Wasn't it? You couldn't just remember the name of that museum. You kept calling it the big art building. Her voice was sugar. Her eyes were knives. Every anecdote was an exhibit. Exhibit A, memory loss. Exhibit B, confusion. And Dr. Sterling. She took the bait perfectly, nodding, asking soft questions disguised as conversation. What year was that trip, Edward? A test. Do you remember who the current mayor is? Another test. I smiled, playing the fool. The keys in the refrigerator? Goodness, I chuckled. I suppose I did. My memory isn't set quite what it used to be. They laughed. They thought they were winning. When she asked about the mayor, I furrowed my brow, gazing at the ceiling. Nutter? No. He was years ago. I said, I'm sorry, doctor, the name escapes me. Kevin's eyes glimmered with victory. He believed every act, every pause. To him, my confusion was proof. To me, it was camouflage. They mistook my silence for decline. They mistook my patience for weakness. But I wasn't confused, I was calculating. The game was theirs, but the board was mine. I let them lead the dance. Question after question, each one building their narrative. I asked small, seemingly lost questions of my own. Is this the fish or the chicken, dear? My eyesight. Remind me, Kevin, what is it your company does again? Something with computers? Each one a carefully chosen brick in the wall. I was letting them build around themselves. By dessert, their confidence was shining. Jessica leaned in, smiling like a victor. Dr. Sterling's notes, mental or written, were piling up. And Kevin, he was ready for the kill. Coffee was poured. The air thickened. Silence fell, heavy and waiting. Kevin cleared his throat. His cue? Dad, he began, placing a hand over mine. His tone oozed concern. "Jessica and I have been so worried about you lately." His eyes glistened with false compassion. "You sipped done so much for me, for the family. You worked hard, sacrificed everything. And now, it's our turn to take care of you." He squeezed my hand, rehearsed sincerity dripping from every syllable. Jessica nodded beside him, the perfect partner in crime. "We just want to make sure you set safe, Edward. That your legacy is protected." That word protected hung in the air like poisoned perfume. Protected from what? From whom? From me, apparently. Kevin straightened, shifting to his business voice. "Dad, because we care so much, we felt it was our responsibility to take a more active role in helping manage your finances. It's complicated now, and well," he paused, glanced at Dr. Sterling, then back at me. "We've begun a certain legal process." And there it was. The dagger behind the smile. The room felt suddenly smaller, the air charged. Jessica looked down, feigning sadness. Dr. Sterling's gaze flicked between us, her mind no doubt writing the narrative already: a worried family, an aging father, a delicate intervention. They thought I was cornered. They thought this was checkmate. But what Kevin didn't know was that 15 minutes earlier, everything he thought he owned had already slipped through his fingers. The transfer was complete, the foundation charter active, the estate, the assets, the legacy, all of it gone, out of his reach, locked away forever. He was fighting for control of an empire that no longer existed. I looked at him across the polished wood table, this man I had raised, this stranger who now sought to bury me beneath the paperwork of pity, and I smiled. A slow, gentle smile. Because in that moment I realized something. The war was already over, the battlefield had been cleared, the pieces removed. All that remained was the performance. I leaned back, my tone soft, my eyes weary but clear. "A legal process, you say? How very thoughtful of you, Kevin." He blinked, uncertain. For the first time that evening, doubt flickered across his perfect expression. I let the silence stretch, heavy and deliberate. Then slowly I said, "Well, I suppose I should have expected as much. After all, you've always been thorough." Jessica frowned, confusion creeping into her polished poise. Dr. Sterling shifted slightly, her pen pausing mid-note. Kevin smiled again, but the confidence was faltering. "Dad, this isn't set an attack." "Oh, I know," I interrupted softly. "It sits protection." And that's when the faint vibration of my phone filled the room. A single message on the screen. A single word: completed. I looked up, meeting Kevin's eyes across the table. And for the first time that night, he didn't smile. I lifted my coffee cup, steady as stone. "To protection," I said. And the silence that followed was absolute. Because somewhere deep down, Kevin knew he'd already lost. But he didn't know how. Not yet. And as the night stretched on and the conversation stumbled through the motions of civility, I sat quietly, watching him, waiting. Because soon enough, he would find out. And when he did, when he realized that every dollar, every deed, every thread of his future had vanished into air, the real war would begin. But for now, I smiled, raised my cup again, and let the shadows of the chandelier dance across my face. After all, the game was far from over. They thought they were walking into a victory dinner. They thought the old man had finally cracked. But what they didn't know was that this would be the night everything turned against them. The chandelier light shimmered across the polished oak table, casting long, sharp reflections that felt almost surgical in their precision. 3 faces stared at him: his son, his daughter-in-law, and the carefully neutral figure of a court-appointed psychiatrist. To them, this was supposed to be an easy performance. A frail father, a signature, a quiet surrender. But Edward Coleman had not survived 80 years by being naive. He sat still, his expression unreadable, while his son spoke in a tone coated with syrupy concern. "It's just a formality, really," Kevin said softly. "A simple document, a legal safeguard, for your protection." Protection. Such a gentle word for a trap. Kevin's voice dripped with false empathy, every syllable rehearsed. The word he didn't say, the one hanging unspoken in the air, was conservatorship. but Edward could hear it echoing behind every hollow phrase. He'd seen enough corporate boardrooms, enough takeover deals, to recognize the maneuver instantly. The air grew still. Even the faint hum of the old clock seemed to fade into silence. 3 pairs of eyes waited for him to crumble. They expected confusion, maybe outrage. Perhaps the rambling denial of a man too old to understand what was happening around him. But Edward was calm, utterly, devastatingly calm. He looked at his son, his own flesh and blood, and saw something dark and cold flicker behind the mask of pity. Predatory pity. That was the look. The look of a man who had already decided that compassion was a liability. And in that moment, something shifted. Edward felt the clarity of decades of discipline rise to the surface, the same precision that once guided million-dollar negotiations. He understood the game, and he understood that this was the final move. He smiled, just a small, quiet smile. But in the silence, it landed like thunder. Kevin froze, his smirk faltering. He didn't understand the smile. He had come expecting weakness. Instead, he saw something he couldn't categorize: confidence. Slowly, Edward lifted the linen napkin from his lap, folded it once, then again, and placed it gently beside his plate. The sound of that napkin settling on the wood was louder than any argument. Jessica shifted uncomfortably. Dr. Sterling frowned, sensing the script slipping from her grasp. The tension in the room coiled tighter with every heartbeat. Then Edward spoke. "Kevin," he said softly, his voice smooth as glass. "You mentioned protecting my assets. Which assets, specifically, were you concerned about? The house?" The question landed with surgical precision. Kevin blinked, unprepared. His pre-written speech collapsed instantly. There was no confusion in his father's tone. No trace of dementia or frailty, just measured intelligence. Before Kevin could recover, Edward reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket. 3 pairs of eyes tracked the movement. He withdrew a single white envelope. Crisp, clean, heavy with consequence. He didn't toss it. He slid it across the table, smoothly, silently, until it stopped directly before his son. "You might want to talk to the new owners about the house," Edward said evenly. "They take possession this Friday." Kevin stared at the envelope as though it were a live grenade. He tore it open, his hands trembling now, and pulled out the contents: a business card embossed with gold lettering, and beneath it, a contract of sale. The heading was bold, the address unmistakable. And the red stamp across the page? Sold. The silence that followed was complete, suffocating. Kevin's complexion drained to ash. Jessica's hand went slack, the spoon she'd been holding clattering onto her plate, a metallic exclamation mark to the collapse of their plan. Edward sat back, serene. They had come expecting an easy victory. Instead, they were watching their empire evaporate in real time. But Edward wasn't set finished, not even close. He let the silence stretch long enough for the panic to bloom, then continued in that same gentle, measured tone. "That sale," he said, "was merely the first step in simplifying my estate. A bit of necessary housekeeping. But now, Kevin, we come to the real matter, the one you've been circling like a vulture for months." Kevin swallowed hard. Edward clasped his hands calmly. "As for the rest of my assets, including my investment portfolio, the rare book collection, and all liquid proceeds from the house, those have been transferred into a new entity." A flicker of hope flashed in Kevin's eyes. He thought he still had a chance. Edward leaned forward slightly. His next words extinguished that flicker completely. "It's sets called the Clara Coleman Literary Legacy Fund." The name hit the air like sacred scripture. His late wife's name, Kevin's mother. The woman whose memory had been little more than an inconvenience to her son's ambition. "It sets an irrevocable trust," Edward continued. "A permanent legal structure. The assets no longer belong to me. They belong to the fund. Forever." The word irrevocable landed like a verdict. Kevin's face contorted confusion, disbelief, fury. He understood what that meant better than anyone. There was no undoing it. No loopholes, no appeal. Edward went on, each word deliberate, unstoppable. "The trust will fund public libraries, university scholarships, the preservation of art and literature." He paused, letting the image burn into their minds. It will serve knowledge, not greed. Jessica gasped quietly, her nails digging into the table. Kevin sat frozen, his jaw trembling. And as for you, Edward said softly, you and Jessica are not named as beneficiaries. You will not receive a single dollar. Not now, not ever. The silence that followed was absolute. Then the color drained from Kevin's face, replaced by an angry crimson. His lips trembled, his fists clenched. Jessica's eyes darted wildly, searching for words that wouldn't come. Dr. Sterling stood abruptly, breaking the unbearable quiet. Well, she said, her voice sharp, professional, detached. This has been enlightening. She turned and walked out, heels clicking against the floor. The echo of her footsteps was the sound of judgment. And then there were three. Edward rose slowly, the movement controlled and dignified. For the first time that evening he stood tall, no longer the frail old man they had come to manipulate, but the strategist, the patriarch, the man who had built an empire from intellect and willpower. Kevin Sepp's fury boiled over. You can set. Edward silenced him with a glance. You were always obsessed with numbers, he said quietly, with price. But you never understood value. You never understood the worth of a legacy. He reached into his pocket one last time and drew out an old brass key, the key to the house that was no longer his. He placed it gently on the table. The small metallic click echoed like a gavel strike. Then he turned, leaving his son and daughter-in-law frozen in the ruins of their greed. He walked into the cool night, the scent of autumn sharp in the air, and for the first time in years he felt free. Not triumphant, not vengeful. Just peaceful. Because tonight wasn't about revenge, it was about reclaiming something much deeper. His dignity, his legacy, his truth. And as he disappeared into the darkness, Kevin sat staring at the brass key, small, cold, meaningless. The only thing his father had left him. But somewhere inside that silence, a question began to take shape. If the old man had been capable of orchestrating this, selling the house, creating the trust, moving the assets with such precision, then what else had he prepared? Was this truly the end of his plan? Or just the beginning of something much larger, something his son could never control? Because sometimes the greatest power isn't set in what you take away, but in what you leave behind. And Edward Coleman had just rewritten the definition of victory.